All right, welcome back, Gadgetarians. So I thought we'd have a little fun today. I was perusing my comments and I saw a comment about how I should cut my beard, and it was very ugly and it can get food caught in it. Wait, no, it wasn't that comment, but I really did get that comment. Now, this comment was a little different. Now, as you know, I prefer Linux as my main operating system, but this comment said, and I quote, "Why don't you just build a Hackintosh?" Well, I thought about that. You know, it's really interesting building a Hackintosh and the trials and tribulations that go along with it. And for those who do it, I understand. Let's just get one thing out of the way right now. It makes perfect sense to me for somebody who wants to use OS X and builds a Hackintosh to save a crap ton of money on the hardware, because we all know that Apple hardware is too expensive for the average consumer, but the average consumer in this case wants to use OS X. Makes sense. So let's get that out of the way right away. I am not denying that it is useful for some people, and I completely understand. But what I'm going to do is give you the 7 reasons why I think the Hackintosh would never work for me, and why I'll never build a Hackintosh, unless of course I was just playing around to see what it was like. I'm probably not going to do it. I'm sorry. All right, let's get right into it. Reason 1. Building a Hackintosh is complex when compared with installing Linux or Windows. You may say to yourself, no, that's not true. A Hackintosh is really easy. It's only a few steps. Oh, it's more than a few steps, let's be honest. Now, I want to compare that to me installing Fedora on a brand new computer. So I got a video coming up on a computer that I built, and I was able to install Fedora and get the apps installed that I wanted and the repositories in 30 to 40 minutes. So for me, installing Linux is very fast. I don't bother checking with hardware compatibility. I just do it. Just go ahead and do the install. But we're talking about time it takes here. Secondly, I did a Windows install on a standard hard drive on a 4th generation i7 computer. This was just yesterday. That thing literally took under 30 minutes. I was shocked at how fast the installer worked. Now, Windows 10 has come a long way. This was the latest ISO download. I believe it was, well, okay, maybe not the latest, but it was 1809. Perfect, beautiful installation procedure. I still rankle at the fact that it asked you questions dispersed throughout the install instead of getting them all out of the way in the beginning so it can just roll and do the installation. But after about 2 reboots, I came back. I had Windows 10. It was done under 30 minutes. No questions asked. You may say, yeah, but I don't want Windows 10 or Linux. I want OS X. Again, back to the preamble. I understand if you need that Hackintosh and you want to save money, I get it. But if you want ease of install and most hardware supported, you're going to find that with Linux, especially with Windows. Now, certain flavors of Linux, of course, are not that great at hardware support and are not going to be as easy to install. I'm referring to the Ubuntu's and Linux Mint and Fedora type installations. I'm not talking about installs like Arch Linux or Slackware or something like that. Don't get me wrong. Let's move on. Number 2. Updating the Hackintosh to the latest OS X release can be a real pain. You know what I'm saying is true. Once you have that Hackintosh all set up, is it easier to just scratch it when a new OS release comes out and do a clean install, or attempt to do the upgrade and then repair the problems? And then the kernel extensions. Do you have to find new kernel extensions? Will there be things that break? Your old kernel extensions no longer work, for example, for whatever particular part of hardware that you need to support. So, in my humble opinion, I can go and do a Fedora update, which I do, and continue working while I do the update. I do not need to do a reboot. I can do a reboot to get the new kernel, or those few packages that you do have to do a reboot for, but otherwise you can just keep working. You can do whatever you want while you're doing an update, and it's simple and quick. Windows 10, maybe not as simple, and their big updates, maybe they don't go through quite as well. I will grant that there can be problems. Oh, by the way, that's why I always wait to do the major creators updates for about a month. I let everybody else experience the pain of the Windows 10 update. Then, after the problems have been fixed, like the last fall creators update, then I do my installation. I mean, for crying out loud, think about it. They had to pull the fall creators update while they fixed problems with installations. But I digress. So the bottom line is, if you want a quick and easy install, I've been on Fedora for a very, very long time, and I found that it is so easy to just do an installation. I've done it on a brand new Dell Ryzen 7 1700 5675. I've done it on a Yoga 920 that is only 8 months old without any hardware problems, and I've also done it on older systems. Yeah, it supports older systems. Awesome. Let's go on. Well, since we're talking about it, I don't have to worry about hardware compatibility. I can just choose whatever I want and install. Now, with Linux, there are some caveats, of course. It is more likely that you're going to have a hardware issue with compatibility, at least possibly initially, if it's brand new hardware, than you would with Windows 10. Have I had an issue with hardware in the last 2 to 3 years? No. The only problem I've had in the past 2 years or so is with the onboard Wi-Fi controller in my newer laptops. However, I've only had it that I can mention one time, and it was a very simple fix. You just had to issue a mod probe command one time, then do the updates, and once you did the updates and rebooted, you were good to go. No more problems. So, hardware issues? In my opinion, I know that many of you out there are going to say Linux is terrible, I had nothing but problems. Well, I wish I knew more about your specifics, what version of Linux you were running, what type of hardware specifically you were putting it on, and, you know, helping you address those issues. If you were my best friend, I certainly would. With the Hackintosh, you have to tailor your hardware to work with macOS, because Apple isn't in the business of selling a general operating system to support the maximum spread of hardware possible like Windows or Linux is. It's only designed to support the hardware they have specifically. So you do have to tailor your Hackintosh to do that. If a part on your Hackintosh is no longer supported, you either have to replace it, or if it's an all-in-one like a laptop, you may run into problems. All right, let's go on. I don't really need any of the software that OS X offers. Isn't it true that most people who buy a Mac buy it for the experience, the hardware and the software? Well, in my case, I buy Macs for exactly that purpose. But as far as the OS goes, I've realized over time that for me it's really a novelty, and I'm not interested in ponying up $300 for video editing software or another $150 for some other software package. I really don't need it. I don't use it. I have all the applications I need in FOSS, free and open source software. So for me, there's really very little point. Now, one possibility might be the environment, the ecosystem that Apple offers. Well, if you like that, I understand again. So you may want to make a Hackintosh, number one, because you want the software that comes with it. And number two, you actually like the ecosystem and the environment that it works in. Fair enough. But for me, I've been using open source apps for a long time now. I had to think back. When was the first time I built my primary system with Linux? And it was back in 2007 or 8, I believe, because I was doing Fedora 8. And I loved it. It worked great. Were there problems? Here and there, but the hardware worked great. and the operating system worked great. Same for today. I'm on Fedora 29, and it is my daily driver. It is the desktop I use. Is there a reason I'll boot into Windows? Primarily two reasons. Number one, to support the work I do as a teacher. I actually should say three. Number two, to play some games. Now, I don't do much gameplay, but sometimes I do like to do it. And number three, I like to do benchmarking in Windows on hardware because there's more tools available like Cinebench R15 and some of the games that you can play only in Windows exclusively. So I like to compare, say, a computer I build for my brother-in-law, which is a video coming up, versus my computer to see which one does better playing the game, frame rate and so on and so forth. That is probably the biggest one for me, number four. I'm happy with the environment. I'm happy with the open source applications I use. Kdenlive is my go-to #1 editor. I don't see a point for me to retool and learn a new way to edit. I'm not one of the fancy editors that you see that put out really nice looking videos, and there are people out there that need that particular editing software, so it makes sense if they want to use the Hackintosh, but not me. Well, it looks like I already covered number 5. I've been using Fedora as my daily driver since 2007. I honestly don't see a point to change. I started learning about Linux in 1997, and it actually was more Unix. We had Unix systems at the place I was employed, and then we started bringing in Linux systems to act as a firewall or some type of service that we were running, whatever it happened to be. And the more I worked in Linux, the more I realized, you know what, it's just easier for me to have a Linux desktop, and it's easier to support those Linux systems that I work on. So I moved away from Windows and went to Linux. I still had to use Windows because Microsoft Office was the de facto standard where I worked. So of course I made a virtual machine just like I have now here on my desktop system and my Yoga 920 laptop. So at some points for work I still did have to use Windows from time to time, but my primary responsibility was server management and network management, and that was always easier for me to do in Linux. So why not just take the next step and create a desktop environment in Linux to match what I was doing on the servers. I love the Linux environment. It's just not something I'm going to part with. I'm trying to sell my MacBook Pro 2017. I don't ever use it. I mean, I purchased it as a novelty, and it does get me some views when I do videos on it, but I've come to the realization I really don't care that much about the number of views because I just love doing Linux stuff. So, you know, having that MacBook and kind of doing a video is like having a bad cup of coffee versus a good cup of coffee. It's like, okay, I gotta do a video to get some views, versus I don't care about the views. I love doing Linux stuff, so let's just do that. All right, next. Nobody builds a Hackintosh to game. You cannot tell me that somebody is going to build a Hackintosh because they want to do gaming. Maybe they're going to do some benchmarking. Maybe they're going to do light gaming because it's there. But the fact is, I simply don't accept that as a primary gaming system they're going to use the Hackintosh. They're going to boot into Windows. When I want to play games that are not supported in Linux, I boot into a Windows system. You ever hear the saying, when in Rome, do what the Romans do? If you go to a restaurant that sells cheeseburgers and they're famous for it, would you really bother getting some type of fancy Caesar salad? It's not a good idea, okay? So what does gaming best? Well, Windows. I mean, we got to admit it. I admit it. If you don't admit it, I don't know. Windows does the best. It supports hardware the best. It gets the best frame rate out of that hardware, and it plays the most games. You're not going to be gaming on a Hackintosh unless it's light and occasional. All right, the last reason, number 7. A Hackintosh doesn't offer the full experience of owning a Mac product. If you want to have that full-bodied experience, right? Kind of like a really nice beer. You're gonna want to buy a Mac. You're coupling the operating system, which is actually designed pretty well for the average user. It's very intuitive in my opinion. I found it very easy to learn. And the quality of the hardware. Is it overpriced? Yeah, I think we all can safely say that the hardware is overpriced. But the fact is, that is why you buy it. So unless you're only interested in what the software is and the workflow in the operating system and the applications, yeah, then you're going to make a Hackintosh. But if you want the full experience and 100% supported hardware by the company, so you don't have to worry about what will happen if I put a new minor update on my system. Will it break my Hackintosh? It's entirely possible. How difficult will it be to fix? What will it do for my workflow? Will I have problems? Will I be able to get my work done after I do this minor update? And then of course there's the major OS X updates. Those are definitely going to break your Hackintosh, and some research would be necessary. I get I'm building my own. I built the hardware. I've installed the Hackintosh. Well, OS X on the Hackintosh. I made this happen myself. I'm very proud of it. I get that. But then you have to maintain it, and there's no Apple in your corner backing you up. All right. Lately, Apple hasn't done a super stellar job of hardware support, and we've heard the worst horror stories of people going to an Apple store, and unfortunately when they take a computer in for some simple problem, they're told, oh, you have to pay $1,500 to get this fixed. We got to replace the motherboard and the screen and everything. And then they go to Louis Rossmann. I don't know if you've watched his videos where people come in and they say, hey, they told me it's $2,000 to fix my MacBook Air. I might as well just get a new one. And then, of course, he looks at it and it's $70 to fix it. So not everything is stellar with Apple at this point in time. But most of the time, you do get great support, whether you're still in warranty or you decide to buy AppleCare. And depending on your status as a working professional and what you use your system for, you may find that you need that AppleCare support and you don't want any questions while that system is under AppleCare. You just want it either replaced or fixed, and you want it done quickly. The other factor is with the Hackintosh, I hear all the time on the videos, I haven't gotten iMessage or AirDrop working yet, but all I have to do is buy this hardware or do this or do that, and it'll start working. If that's the case, why didn't they do it by the end of the video? If it took another day, why didn't they just do it if it's so easy? Aha! Maybe it's not so easy. iMessage is one of the coolest functions. If you have an iPhone, you love being able to message on your Mac or your MacBook or whatever, and it's really cool when, if you have to, you could take calls on your MacBook. So to say that that feature is not available and it'll just take more work to get it working until there's an update, of course. Or AirDrop, which very few of the Hackintosh users I've seen have ever gotten it working, which is totally disappointing. I actually like AirDrop, and I've used it quite a bit between my phone and my MacBook when I'm using my MacBook. So it's a nice feature. Take the features away. What other features are we missing? And here's something ominous I'm wondering. What is the plan with the T2 chip? What if it becomes required to run OS X? Now that would actually be a logical thing for Apple to do. They can't possibly like the whole concept of Hackintoshes. They haven't gone out and sued anybody because of Hackintoshes, but if you think about it, that T2 chip is quite powerful, and right now it technically keeps you from running Linux on a MacBook with the T2 chip. Well, here's the thing. You can run it. You can get it to work if you disable Secure Boot, but currently you can't access the internal storage on your MacBook Pro, so, or whatever Mac you happen to have that has the T2 chip. I could see the opposite happening, where we no longer are able to actually have access to OS X on a Hackintosh without a T2 chip. how would you do that? Well, it would be built into the operating system, so theoretically somebody could hack around it, but if it's integrated properly, I'm going to go with no. So there you have it. Those are my 7 reasons why I'll never build a Hackintosh to actually use as a production device. And I don't need to, and I have no interest to. So thought I'd just lay that out there, and you can basically stop with the why don't you build a Hackintosh comment, because I'm never going to do it. And as far as cutting my beard, what do you have against storing food in a beard? Come on, haven't you read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. This video was made possible with support from viewers like you. If you find this video useful, consider becoming a patron for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/FastGadgets.